Hi there, and welcome to the Skylight Books author reading series. If you'd like to learn more about us and our many upcoming author events, please visit skylightbooks.com, where you can browse our inventory, buy books, and join our Friends with Benefits Club. You can also follow us on Twitter, Tumblr, and Facebook. To speak to a real live bookseller like me, please call 323-660-1175. Thanks for your support, and enjoy.
Today, of course, we're absolutely delighted to have Johanna Hedva in conversation with Asher Hartman. Asher Hartman is a multidisciplinary artist and an intuitive who offers readings to enhance the glorious nature of the human being vividly and without obstruction. His work has been shown at LACMA, the Machine Project, Berkeley Art Museum, as well as elsewhere. Johanna Hedva is a glamorous, melodramatic, queer, gender non-binary femme performance artist and witch. In short, Hedva is an open source sort of person, an outsider committed to modes of doing and making. Hedva's work appears in the Getty's 2013 Pacific Standard Time, LA Architecture and Design Museum, MoCAM, the Museum of Contemporary Art on the Moon, and has been published in Black Warrior Review, Asian American Literary Review, 3AM, Gender Fail, Which LA, as well as elsewhere. Hedva is perhaps best known for a cycle of queer ancient Greek plays and the essay Sick Woman Theory, which has been widely republished and retranslated. On Hell is a compact and beautifully produced novel. It has been called brilliant, fervent, unafraid, unapologetic, insurrectionary, fierce, nakedly vulnerable, intensely embodied, brutalized, devastating, romantic, tender, furious, ferocious, and fucking brilliant. Let's please give these two a warm round of applause.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Asher. And this is...
I'm Johanna.
And we're going to talk. So, Johanna, I'm here to ask you a number of questions. I think I'll get started with...
Wait. We have to play the video.
Oh.
Now listen, motherfuck, if not nihilism, what? After the children learn to read, then what? They hear the noise of the drag of their bodies dragged around this place. Meat-eat men, shoot lone go, meals money market, and they see they have no place, no power, only gravity, so then what? They can get a tattoo, they can like a song. Is that freedom? Or is it just more gravity? You know you put the word advise in an email, you get flagged. You know that, right? Unix toad fish, you get flagged. Artichoke with a capital A, flag. Biggest sex, flag. Also big N nerd and little f fangs. This is true. The government, they're poets. They're word hunters. Motherfuck, you can't ask me what you're asking me, questions like these and think there will be answers. What do you want to know, mama? Why you come here to ask me this? I wouldn't know anyway, I'm not on. 8 almost 9 years off. I was 17 when I went in 2005, 8 years ago, and now that I'm out, part of the program is that I still have to be off for 10 shit-eating years. I have to be off, that's what. So now I get my news like a two-right fart, which means I get it after they've been holding it in all day, which means I don't get any new news. Nope, I don't know what anything is anymore. Of course, that's what you imagine. Of course, I can't possibly be, what's the word, ahem, relevant? Yeah, obviously I lost things other than the goddamn internet when I was in. Lost chocolate, for example, how about that? I was addicted to that shit for 6 years before I went in. Yeah. Since I was 11. Ate it every day of my life. There's no chocolate in prison. Yeah. Duh. It's like, girl, it's a non-chocolate kind of place. Not a chocolate. First thing I did when I got out was get a chocolate bar. But I'd lost the taste for it. Tastes like dirty smoke to me now. I'd remembered it being sweet, but it's not. You know. It made my mouth sticky as shit, like tired fucking old dirt. I got tired. It got lost forever. Fuck it. I lost all the friends I had on, and obviously lost my convictions, my resistance, my quote-unquote insurrectionary tendencies, my fuck my father, fuck all everything. But losing the taste for chocolate, I don't know, that did probably bigger damage. In the way that'll crush a bitch. It's a cute little malady to have, right? The world has bigger problems, right? Sorry motherfuck, what did you ask me? Oh yeah, about the words. Yeah, I'm off, but being in the world even for this year, I still find this all the fuck out. I mean, who do you think I am? Oh, that's right, mama, you think I'm Lil. Air. Ella. Vent. Yeah, I mean 8 years off, sure I get it, but it's not hard to find out. I know the words, they sailed through the air, it was like the air was singing. That's what the government does, isn't it? It sings to you without you knowing it, and every morning you have a song in your head and you don't know how it got in there, it just sounds like your own voice. So now you motherfuck, you want to know if I know the words they wait for? That's your first question for me. Think about that words have become so important that you start us off like this because the government fucking waits for them. Every day they are waiting for them to appear like Jesus cocksucking Christ Lord, the cock has risen. Men in power waiting to read the words package. Chameleon man, frog legs. Beef. Market. Garbage. Speed bump. Hate. Fissionable. Utopia. Freedom. Cocaine. White noise. Pink noise. Pink noise, ha. Now what could that be? That means anything to the goddamn United States government. A pink asshole puckering up noise like a little shit seepage. I told you these guys are just waiting the fuck around to suck a god's dick. Me nah. Now I have my own favorite words. Words are like car sort of motion in themselves. They can move things around, they can get high up there, and you in fact don't have to wait for them at all. That's what those guys get so wrong. The words take you. They just fucking go and bang, that's it. And me. Fuck, I want to go now. Yeah, I'm fucking sick of fucking waiting. That's what this is all about. That's all you need to know or care about. That I want to fly, I want to fly, I want to fly, I want to fly. I want. Fuck. I want to get the fuck off this fucking ground. I don't want to talk about the government and what they want. Motherfuck, don't make me do that. For 8 years I did what they wanted. Now I do what what I want. What is there? There's a lot. The flying words, let me tell you some flying words so you can get how they move. Methods of lift, dynamic lift, static lift, powered lift, angle of sweep, flying wing, rotary wing, dihedral angle, polyhedral, variations along the span, flarecraft, dependent drag, sea skimmer, wing and ground effect, thrust, propeller, lifting body, up, go. Hear that motherfuck? Just listen to them. Up, go, 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 go.
Yeah. You want to talk about the words and how you came to these two characters? What your process is? Do you want to start with that?
Yeah. So, this list of words, chameleon man, artichoke, beef, is an actual list of words of government tracking terrorist activity words that they were tracking in emails, and that list was leaked in the summer of 2013. And when I read it, I thought it was so poetic and weird and strange. And that's the beginning of me writing this book, was getting that list of words and just being like, so the government is tracking if you write about beef in your emails, like, because that's terrorist activity. So I started there. So this video is from the first chapter. And very quickly, this voice sort of emerged that was full of rage and care at the same time for what's happening. And that became the kind of main voice of this book, who is Angel, the hacker, at the heart of it. And then the other character, Motherfuck, is his interlocutor, playing on a lot of interesting tropes of like the confessor, the priest, the nurse, the journalist. She's sort of listening to him go through his litany of grievances.
And how did you come to the hacker? How did you arrive at that character?
I was just into it at the time because it was around the same time that these Lulzsec kids were all getting out of jail. And Lulzsec was this hacker group of like kind of insurrectionary pranksters who were doing things like hacking the CBS News homepage to say that Tupac was alive, and just like cool, fun stuff that was also very political, like more kind of flippant than anonymous shenanigans at the time, that other, kind of hacktivist collective. The Lulzsec kids were 4 kids, all under the age of like 18, that were just doing this like in their basement. And they all started getting out of prison around the same time this list of words was leaked. And I was just paying attention to them because they were, one of the conditions of their parole was that they couldn't be on the internet at all. So they couldn't like go to college or get a job, because they couldn't, even like they couldn't be an Uber driver, for example, because they couldn't be on the internet. Well, one of them, did somebody just say what happened to them? Well, one of them I got really kind of into because the entire time he had been doing this sort of hacktivism kind of killing spree, he was 14 and just living alone on the Shetland Islands. Like his mother lived on the mainland and he just lived alone. He was like live debating the Westboro Baptist Church on the radio about their heinous practices, like just very interesting stuff. And of course, like they failed because they all got busted. But I found them to be just really interesting kind of examples of insurrectionary anti-heroes in the 21st century.
But it seems like the voice of this particular person that gets transposed into Rafael, this other person. Is that the case?
Yeah, so a lot of the chat room like logs of this group were also released at some point when they were out of prison. And I was really fascinated by how they talked to each other, because they didn't know each other in physical corporal space. They were all just doing this like hacking stuff and these like kind of projects or revolutionary projects alone, and then kind of checking in with each other in a chat room. And so the chat room kind of voices that emerged were so interesting. They didn't use, any punctuation. It was just sort of like, blah, it was very raw, but also really strategically intended about what they wanted to accomplish. So I just was into that, and I wanted to kind of rewrite all the ones that got very famous, like the famous hacktivists were the like white boys from middle class backgrounds. And all of like the brown boys who had such a hard time, like Sabu, who had to turn FBI informant, for example, because he was the one with the most to lose. Those stories kind of got swept under the rug a bit. So this book was me trying to say, like, what if we rewrote it and the most famous, most important one was, an East LA kid?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about language, embodiment, experience?
Yes.
And yes,
All
of those things. And who has the right to use what language? I'm certain you've been asked that question before.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. So I get asked sometimes around this book, like, is it okay for you to be writing a first-person narrative for a person whose identity is not yours in terms of the kind of identity politic physical markers of a character? Like Rafael is a Guatemalan American. He's a assigned male at birth, cisgendered queer man. And so I'm writing in his first person for most of the time. The other character is the one that's more sort of close to my identity markers, like Korean American, assigned female at birth, this kind of thing. And for me, I know like right now it's kind of treacherous moment to be doing something like this. It feels very transgressive and not allowed and not generative maybe to push into these places where you may not have like a free pass, right? But to me, like, I don't like the idea that there's like sort of ownership over certain identities, because to me that replicates the kind of like settler colonial idea of ownership. I think that there's a big difference between that, like who's allowed to talk about certain experiences based on ownership rather than the embodiment of a lived experience. So there's a lot about Rafael in terms of his embodiment that I deeply relate to. Like he's the one that maps closer to me in terms of certain experiences and psychologies and beliefs and the embodiment of him. But Motherfuck, the other character, is perhaps closer to how like I look and like what I would check boxes on in a consensus form. So I know it's a bit, it's a tense moment to be doing that, but I just felt like I wanted to talk about something that was kind of pushing back against this idea that we have ownership over certain experiences rather than interested in the nuance of the embodiment of things.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of body tends to turn up quite a lot in your work, and systems of oppression in connection with that. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the way oppression gets internalized, the way its effects on the body are manifest, particularly in this book on hell.
Yes. Well, wait, can I just do my sentimental thing that I wanted to do for you, my Moon and Cancer moment?
Oh.
I just wanted to say how happy I am that you're doing this with me.
Yeah.
Because I really think that Asher is such a genius and somebody that has influenced me a lot. And we've known each other for years. And I'm just so happy that you're here.
Yeah, well, I'm really happy to be here and back at you. It's very fun.
Like, it
Yeah.
makes me feel very good. And
Yeah,
it means
me
a lot to me that all of you were here, too.
Yeah, exactly.
But I was kind of like, but Asher Hartman is going to talk tonight. Like,
Shut up, I'm the foil to you, you golden thing. So talk
the
about
body.
The body.
Right. So I think that all of my work on some level is just about trying to grapple with how these sort of systems of oppression are actually in us all. They're not just sort of outside of us, having their way with us. They're kind of internalized in very deep ways, like in terms of like, your DNA even, molecular, cellular levels of kind of believing and ingesting the ideology of certain beliefs. Mm-hmm. So I kind of think that that's the main task actually to try to deal with, is like unlearning this thing that is actually really deeply embodied and comes out, day to day, all the time. Like, we're all conditioned to have, a white supremacist ideology. Some of us are affected differently by it, of course, but it's in us, all of us. Mm-hmm. And so the challenge, especially as an artist, is to kind of like see what that, like bear witness to what that is like, but also sort of look at ways that in the body itself you can unlearn it or repair or rehabilitate or that kind of thing.
But can you ever really pick apart all the facets?
I don't think so.
It seems like
that's
the character...
That's a pessimistic moment.
Yeah. The character goes to great lengths to try to alter the body.
Yeah.
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 Mm.
And that's sort of like, I feel like some days I feel like doing something like that. Like maybe the only way to get this out of me is to just have some horror movie scenario play out. But yeah, like I think that the, interesting challenge as artists is to actually say like, it's all in me. Like it's all of it is in me. Whether or not like, in theory, my belief is that I'm working toward abolishing white supremacy. It's like in my cells. Like, and so day in, day out, how is the practice of that going to shift things?
I mean, do you think it's in your ancestors' cells and their ancestors?
Yeah. Do you want to, we have a fabulous list of topics to talk about here, and I think one of them is just like intergenerational trauma.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. Well, do you want to say anything about it?
I mean, I can speak to it a little bit. I mean, my job is to be an intuitive, to be AKA psychic reader. So I read a lot of people, and that trauma shows up in all kinds of ways. Not without sort of not being sacred about it, just speaking sort of generally about it. It's not only grandparents and great-grandparents who will show up, but people that the person who's receiving the reading has never seen, but can identify bodily. There's a bodily connection to that being, and sometimes it'll be attached to a particular kind of trauma or difficulty. And sometimes people will be affiliated with people they don't actually genetically relate to, which is also very interesting. I have to say that also, because I'm a human, I'm a filter, so my psychology is inevitably a part of that. But it's enough of a pattern, and I would say it's almost always present in everyone I read. And so I think it's, interesting to think about trauma, not just in the present, and not just merely in terms of epigenetics, but metaphysically, psychically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because one of the things about us is you make a living as a psychic intuitive, and I make a living primarily as an astrologer. And so we're often like talking shop. And there is something like when I see a chart where the first thing I see in it always is the trauma that's in the chart. It just sort of like radiates. And a lot of the time there are ways that you can understand it in the chart through a family or a heritage kind of lineage. Like something that you might have, inherited and been passed down from your ancestors. So yeah, that was another thing that I was saying to you last night, is that for me, I don't necessarily believe in like reincarnation or past lives and the like kind of normative idea of that. I think that your ancestors are your past lives. And so the DNA that you carry is like your karma.
And so that trauma shows up in the body in all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
And I have to say, too, not to get too far into the subject, but, it sometimes will hang on a tiny little incident, something as simple as somebody, looked at you in a certain way in the third grade, or you weren't allowed to speak, or somebody pushed you away from the pencil sharpener. Often it's education. Education is a place of a lot of trauma for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be overwhelming. Often it isn't, even though those things are there too.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about why there are no commas in
Yes!
this book?
When we were meeting to discuss about tonight, I was like, the only thing I want to talk about is how there are no commas in this book, because I worked very hard to make it readable despite that fact. Yeah, the greatest compliment that I've gotten so far about this book, in my mind, is that it's a quick read. And that's because it really shouldn't be, but it is. And so that means that my 100 drafts of working on it paid off. So the idea is there are no commas in the book. There is punctuation, but only at the end of a sentence. There are no markers in the middle of a book, or in the middle of the sentence to kind of guide you. And to me, like, the comma is the moment when the writer is like trying to extend trust to the reader. They're like, hey, are you okay to go on? Okay, like that. Are you okay to, we're gonna keep going. Are you okay to do that? Like, it's this very like, it's a check-in. And I'm a big fan of commas in every other project I've ever done. But in this one, I didn't want it to feel like that. I wanted it to feel like you were in this like semi-truck and the brakes had gone out and you were like going down the grapevine downhill. And it was just sort of like whether you liked it or not, the end of the sentence was going to come. And you had to, go along for the whole ride. So it was the main craft that went into this book was to get the sentences to be rhythmic and have pauses that you could naturally feel without the comma doing that for you.
Well, it's interesting because all those drafts, when you're actually physically writing, are you, this is kind of a silly question perhaps, but do you consider that you're sort of channeling this information?
Yeah.
How do you...
Well, yeah.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about it because you also channel your writing.
Yeah, but let's talk about your writing.
But I feel like I got like the green light when I heard that you did that.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't, my writing practice is very regimented, but I don't really know what happens during that time. Like I wake up and the first thing I do is start writing. If I check my email, if I look at my phone, the whole rest of the writing day is derailed. So I can't do that. I just wake up, I'm still kind of in this, somnambulant dream space. And then I start writing, and I do 500 words without stopping. That's always the kind of idea. And then I make a cup of coffee, and then I go back and kind of deal with what just happened, But I really don't, I can't account for what happened during that time. It's just that that's what it is.
Well, I'm going to talk about then mysticism.
Right. Mysticism, ?
Yeah. How does that factor into your work, your writing, your life, your chart?
Yes. Well, so I remember when I first read your chart, it articulated something for me, which is that I consider myself a mystic, but I'm like the kind that's like writhing around on the temple floor, getting visions that I can't control. Whereas you, when I saw your chart, I was like, oh, I get it. Asher's a god.
It's a known fact. Tell us something we don't know.
And you sit, it's like you're the king of heaven, you're sitting in the throne, and there's no rising, there's and there's a bunch of astrology mumbo jumbo that I could use to back me up here, but I think that's kind of a difference, is when I think of your work, I think it's kind of very controlled, and you have you're making a lot of choices along the way of when to open the door or put the antenna up to get other kinds of messages, and when to not. And I feel like mine is, I'm just well, the door is fucking open the whole time, and I just better write it down, whatever is coming in,
May I mention the V word, the void?
Yeah, the void.
Okay, the void.
The V word.
Yeah, because last night you were talking about the void.
Yes.
And I'm just really curious about that as it informs your life, your work, the way you approach all of this work.
The most of anything.
Yeah.
Is the void.
And what does that feel like, the void?
It's a nightmare. It's just really hard. In my case, I feel like the main kind of symbolism, or anytime I ever got asked one of these questions, what's your totem animal, or these kinds of questions, to me, mine was well, there's this 30-foot by 30-foot by 30-foot black cube that's just right behind my head all the time, and I can't see it because if I turn, it swivels with me, but it's there all the time, no matter where I am. It's just kind of this monumental mass, and it's the color and texture of obsidian, depth, but not anything you can access. So I feel like that's just sort of what I came in with in this world. And the challenge is to survive, but I think the only way to kind of manage, void baggage is jokes and glamour.
Yeah.
Because it's just there, and what are you going to do? You can't get rid of it.
Yeah, no, I think, but the death and the void feel very close together.
Yes.
Is there a kind of hovering for you, a kind of suspension between
Right.
life and death in your?
Do you think this is a good time to talk about the death anxiety?
Yeah, I think it's best time.
Okay. So the kind of one of the main consequences of having this sort of like void behind my head at all times is that I have terrible death anxiety, and I've had it my whole life. It happens at least once a day where I'm completely suffocated by this like, it's happening now! Like, I'm dying now! I'm being obliterated like that. And the only thing, like I'm, you know, the only thing that has happened after decades of trying to find a way to cope with this feeling is that my partner, who is rudely awakened like basically every night of me grabbing them out of sleep and saying, I don't want to die, like that. The only thing that has happened is at some point he was like, you're not going to die. And I was like, oh, okay, great. So it's a lie, but it has really helped.
It helped you survive.
Yeah.
Mm.
Because at least the feeling is like, well, I'm not dying now. I mean, I am. See, it's going to happen again.
Right.
But
You're not dying.
I'm not.
dying.
Yeah, see,
It's fine.
But it's not happening now.
No.
Right.
Well, let's switch from the void and death to the gender pit.
Right, the gender pit. This was something that we came up with last night as like a topic.
Because the gender
This
factors
conversation.
it factors in your life and work
Yes.
and
Yes.
in very complicated ways. So
Yes.
I wonder if you could talk to that in On Hell.
The gender pit.
Yeah.
Right. So
Who's-
in On Hell, the gender stuff is, I mean, in some way, On Hell for me was like a big exercise in writing what drag feels like, but in different ways, not just gender stuff, like ethnicity, class, like a lot of different, like race, drag, like these kinds of things. All of like the really taboo shit you're not supposed to do right now. But gender was the kind of, you know, template or something, the gender kind of, I want to say the gender terrorism, but I know that some drag queens say that they're gender terrorists, like as a good thing, so I don't want to like equate that as being bad. But like the feeling, maybe it's like patriarchal terrorism, like the feeling of being kind of terrorized by the patriarchy all the time. For On Hell, it felt really important that there were like strategies to kind of like work that out in a way that wasn't just being annihilated by it all the time and like kind of like, you know, miserable. It was sort of like, you know, yeah, we're going to just live with this patriarchal terrorism on some level. So I feel like another way of saying this is that like, I think the book is just very staunchly in the gender pit all the time, but it's trying to like be fabulous down there, you know?
But there's a lot of strain and suffering and desire to leave the body and to fly.
Yes.
You know, because the Icarus myth is obviously a foundation in part for the book, I would think.
Yes.
So the struggle in the body with gender, does that, and when you think about patriarchy, do you think about that in the present or historically or deeply metaphysically or all the
like
above?
all of the above, yeah. But I guess what I mean is too, like, I think we were saying this yesterday, is that there was a feeling at some point in my life when I kind of learned that you were supposed to choose between two gender options, and those were the only options. And I feel like up until that point, I was like, oh, I'm a fire-breathing dragon. Like, you know, as a child, there were so many different ways of, you know, projecting my identity into a body that ended up not being afforded to me when I got into the real world, and I feel like I'm still just really angry about that. So it's sort of like I feel like I was walking along and having an okay time, and then I fell in the gender pit.
When did that happen?
Oh, like maybe age like 8 or something. 7 or 8.
7 or 8.
Yeah, because right around then, you know, at school, on the playground, you're sort of being socialized into gender shit and what you're allowed, like what role you're allowed to play in the school play. Stuff like that starts to happen. Like in 3rd grade, was the lead in the school play, and my role was Harriet the hamburger.
That's really fitting, actually.
Well, oh, that's like so shady.
Really good casting.
But yeah, it just felt like such a drag. Like, oh man, and now this is just gonna be like this forever. So yeah.
Okay. What's your favorite food?
Oh yeah. Well, I'm a Taurus, so I'm like a basic bitch. So my favorite food is like a burger and pizza and ice cream and a burrito.
Yeah, and I like broccoli.
Yeah, I don't believe you.
I like broccoli. I love broccoli with sauce.
With sauce.
Cheese sauce.
Yeah.
And nuts.
And nuts.
And chicken. And sweet and sour sauce. Okay, so I want to ask you, Monsters and Cyborgs. Would you
Yes.
Would you consider this book part of like, and forgive me because I'm not very educated in this way, but cyberpunk or?
Yes.
So you would consider that?
I hope, yeah.
Mm-hmm,
I mean, I know that cyberpunk is like over, but I loved it, and I think that this is my minor contribution to that canon. Yeah.
And so when you think about monsters, how do you think about monsters in relation to being, to the body, to existence?
I think it's so helpful to just think like we are all monsters. That's so helpful. You know, it just clears so much up. You know, and I was saying that one of the things that really informed me, just as like a writer and an artist, was Colson Whitehead's essay, memoir essay about growing up watching B horror movies with his family. If you haven't read this essay, it was amazing. It came out like 10, maybe 12 years ago in the New Yorker. Basically, he was, you know, he's now won the Pulitzer for the Underground Railroad, but like his first novel was a zombie novel. And when he was growing up, on Friday afternoon, his brother and him would go to the video rental place and get a stack of VHS B horror movies and bring them home, and the whole family would watch them all weekend, every weekend. And he has this very lovely kind of thesis in that essay about how, for him as a young black kid in New York, watching these horror movies was like the accurate depiction of how society was, like how monstrous everyone was, you know? And then at some point, when he decided he wanted to be an artist, he kind of realized that like an artist is a monster who just stopped disguising themselves. So at some point there was like this cool turn where, you know, monstrosity and embodying monstrosity as a choice seemed really cool rather than something that was scary, you know? Or maybe it still is scary, but it's not harming you.
Well, yeah, I mean, when I read people, there are a lot of people who aren't human at all, internally. Not at all. And it's a wonderful thing when people can step out of their human suit for a minute and step into this other aspect of self, which typically is so powerful that it is almost threatening to the survival of that person if they don't actually own and live in that monster suit, if you will.
Yes.
And it's not always, you know, a monster or whatever that actually means, but
could
sometimes
be an alien.
very much so. Lot of aliens here in Los Angeles.
Definitely.
Okay, so I have one final question for you, I think.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know how we are on time, but I want to ask you about talking about yourself, your personal life, in front of people,
Right.
in your work, occasionally.
Yeah. So some of you may have read Sick Woman Theory, and the reception of that article was really beyond anything I was prepared to cope with. And I got asked a lot of questions about it that had a similar, the question was kind of always the same. And it was people wondering how I could speak so nakedly about these very vulnerable, personal things I was dealing with, like illness and trauma and abuse and that kind of thing. And it kind of threw me because I remember thinking, like, I don't think these are personal things I'm talking about. I'm talking about systemic things. Like, they're not personal to my individual body. So that's sort of how I think about it. I mean, we are individuals, alas, but, like, I guess the one thing that I would say is connected from Sick Woman Theory and that project to this book is coming from like a crip politic, which is a politic that foregrounds interdependency and care over anything else. So the idea that I would be like an individual representative of illness or anything else is just bullshit, So I don't really think that I'm sitting, nakedly before you talking about my own personal trauma. I think I'm talking about like a systemic kind of thing that we're all doing and dealing with all the time. What about you?
In terms of talking about myself?
Yeah. Because all of your work, in some way, is like all of your characters in your plays are, kind of elements or facets of yourself, but then they're not.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar. I mean, I work with a group of actors. I've worked with the same group of actors for 10 years or so. And so I kind of write through them and me, so we end up kind of being a pile, a mess. And we also usually are both human and non-human in pretty much every piece. But it is really difficult to remove your own subjectivity, if you will, out of your writing. I mean, it seems pertinent or impossible. Nonetheless, I think that, our individual experiences always echo the larger cultural experience of at least our little area of the cul-de-sac, and that then the broader area of, let's say, Los Angeles life or, California life, American life. For me, I don't have any other experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think also we sort of trip through bodies,
Yeah.
Especially when you're working together or you're really intimate with another person. There's a tremendous amount of intimacy in your work,
And yours.
Yeah, and I think also physical intimacy is, and I think it's difficult. I think people are often afraid of feeling. I mean, I will count myself in that.
Right.
Feeling is difficult.
Right. And we want to encourage feeling difficult feelings.
Yes, and also think about productivity is another thing I wanted to just kind of round it.
Yeah.
Like so much of your book and so much of your work talks about time in a very different way. And I wonder if you could just talk about that, and then we'll maybe take some questions.
Yeah. Well, I think no matter what I'm doing, I'm on crip time. I'm disabled. I have chronic illness that I have to manage all the time. And it makes my relationship to time very different in the sense that, sometimes, like a friend of mine, Neve B, put it very well where they said, I'm disabled and I'm femme, so I'm going to be late.
I think that's really important.
Yes,
Lateness.
I think it's very important to be late and to, take longer than capitalism says you need to take, than the art world says you need to take. Oh my God,
Very
the art
difficult.
world's pace is just wild to me. It's like, I get an email, it's like, can you make an entirely new work in 3 weeks and we can't pay you?
Yeah,
and I'm
that's
like,
very common.
and I'm supposed to do this for prestige? Like,
Creative capital.
yeah, creative capital, you asked the wrong person because I do not care about that shit. So I'm a big fan of the long play.
I really like that.
Yeah, like when I'm 60, it's going to be great.
I think it's a great place to end, do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we want to take questions, both of us, if you have questions for Asher also.
Does anybody has a question? Yes.
Question for Johanna. So on the subject of ownership of experiences, I watched an interview of yours from a while ago.
Oh no.
Where the interviewer used the word cripple.
Oh yes, I remember that interview.
Okay.
And I was like, I think it was on video.
Because I didn't catch you doing that on video. What I noticed was she got seemingly very nervous.
Yes.
Sort of backtracked a bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but you said later, referring to that moment, you said, I like to be promiscuous with language. And that's something that I've thought about a lot since watching this interview, because nobody says that. They either say, I can't, I am allowed to say this, or you're not allowed to say this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. I know that's not like a popular mainstream opinion at the moment. My feeling is, like, I've been called a cripple, and it hurts me, yes, but I don't think the solution is to not say that word anymore. But see, I'm old and a curmudgeon, like you are.
Yes, very much so.
Where I kind of think that reclaiming that word and making it very kind of happening all the time is the way through this moment. My nervousness around this moment is that we're being very punitive, but we're not, like, re-educating. And, like, we're kind of banishing people out of society, which is a model that needs the prison to work. And I don't believe in the prison. So I don't think we can just sort of excommunicate folks from society because they said the wrong thing. I don't think that does much. I think it feels good for a moment. It feels really cathartic to do that. But we're going to have to wake up tomorrow and, like, Harvey Weinstein's still going to exist. What are we going to do? Actually, in terms of, like, rebuilding, repairing, doing restorative justice. So I'm not at all a proponent for people just saying whatever in a promiscuous way. But I am a proponent of not sweeping things under the rug because I don't think that will fix things. I think it will feel good. Like right now we're kind of, Saturn was in Sagittarius for 3 years. It was like this reckoning with ideology, and we just burned everything down. And now it's like the harsh light of the next day with Saturn and Capricorn, and we're like, yeah, but what are we actually going to do? Like, how are we going to work toward anti-racism in our society? It's not enough, unfortunately. I wish it was, to just sort of give somebody expel them from the class for saying the wrong thing. But actually, like, we're all still here the next day, and we have to figure out what to do. So I do remember that moment, though, because the other thing about it is being on this other side where people have said that to me and it's been a slur. I would really lose a lot of spoons if I, like, had my whole day ruined every time that's been said to me. So at this point, I'm grading on improvement. And I feel like that is, for me, the only way that feels, like, productive to move forward is, like, if I just sort of, like, got so derailed that my whole life kind of had to go on pause because I needed to cope with that, which sometimes needs to happen, of course. But if that were the only option that I had in my toolkit, like, I wouldn't, I would be really not liberated in the way I would want to be, Of course, this is what works for me, and it's what works for me now at this place. A few years ago, it wouldn't have worked. I would have been really angry at that person and could never speak to them again and, put them in my Trigger City folder on my email, which is a real thing when I have to just get people out of my inbox. It's just like they go right into Trigger City, and then I deal with it when I have the capacity to deal with it and the resources to deal with it. But I'm, like, a little bit further along maybe in my process, so I feel differently about it now.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in what you say about the systemic pathology that gets placed on women. And Kate Zamborino's project of the pathologizing of modernists, T.S. Eliot, F. Scott Fitzgerald, there was. And I'm wondering if you see a historical thread why pathologizing these brilliant women as insane would have been historically oppressed at that time, because she's noticing the resonance of how much these modernists, their work was helped, assisted, possibly created by these women.
Mm-hmm.
And the need for history to pathologize. Or even any comment you have on mental health and how useful it is to, and I don't know if you can cross that way, but I'm just interested how you would rep on it.
Yeah. I mean, I know in the original version that's most circulated of my essay, I talk without critique of Kate Zambrino's project. In the kind of subsequent publications and revisions of that essay, which are in anthologies and stuff like that, I'm a bit more critical on the page, just because I found that project to be overwhelmingly white. But that being said, the way that we have always conceived of mental illness is as a pathology of evil. So this is my biggest pet peeve with y'all Americans. Like, now that I live in Berlin and I come back here, I hear all these like white liberals talking about why Trump is not a good, president because he's like crazy, or he's like mentally unfit to lead. And I'm like, white supremacy is not a mental illness. It's an ideology, and the way that we've always conceived of mental illness is that it explains evil. I said this at a talk last week, but at any movie you've ever seen where the villain is doing some heinous thing, it's explained by the fact that they have a mental illness. And so I have a problem with, that kind of being thrown around as, mental illness, and in general illness, of course, has always been treated as a deviance that needs to be punished. So the hospital and the prison, were invented at the same time. They were the same thing. So in terms of women being pathologized and incarcerated because of any kind of difference from what was considered normative or productive or, valuable in society, we can see how that's still happening, in the sense that to me what sick woman theory was about was how illness, no matter who has it, feminizes you. So disability and gender are co-constructed. Like, you can't really have disability as a discrimination without this idea that to be weak or to require care or whatever is a feminized position. I will say this is kind of answering your question, but tonight tomorrow is the opening at the Armory in Pasadena of an exhibition about Sarah Arledge, who was an artist who was born in 1911, and her career and life kind of spanned the 20th century, born and raised in Pasadena. And she had been involuntarily institutionalized several times in her life, so her work was really erased from what we know of it. And this exhibition is kind of restoring her and finding her archive and presenting it again. So that's an example of this exact thing happening right now. So go see the show if you can.
Are there any other questions?
Well, yeah, I think it's misguided to say that it's toxic or that it's a disease. But that seems to be the way that we want to explain anything that we don't like, is that, the thing that is making America sick are these people, or, that kind of stuff. I really just don't. I just think that's a conflation of things that don't really go together. So toxic masculinity to me is I don't want to say it's an ableist term, but I don't think toxic is.
The MAGA hats and the witnessing of privilege. So that's another trope that's being put on us. That's where the
Yeah.
conversation is.
What's how is that?
So I don't know if you were aware of the Catholic kids on the mall.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So you had a real good example of the wealth divide right there. You saw where extreme privilege and those behavior codes,
Yeah.
and then you saw the eruption of
Mhm.
injustice and the need for redistribution, which I think is the solution
Yeah.
of opportunity and wealth in America.
Yeah.
And it can be clearly seen there. Whether, it doesn't matter taking sides, it's not even, it can be seen. It's just a divide.
Yeah.
So then maybe with your guidance, the correct word is privilege.
Yeah, Fred Moten, who was my mentor for a fellowship, helped me understand privilege, which is that the root word of it is the same as private, which is privis, the Latin privis, which just means individual. So privilege is just the extent that you have been afforded to be an individual. So you're not aware of how you're affected by systemic things. So if you have privilege, you have a certain idea of yourself that is substantiated by society. That no matter what, kind of system you're a part of, you're an individual, you can do whatever you want, you can be who you are, your authentic self, etc., all these things. And so, again, to just sort of plug crip theory, I don't really believe that a politic of the individual is the way. I think it's about interdependency. So about not being an individual, in other words. So some people, of course, in our society have been granted every, kind of individual opportunity to just sort of live as they imagine they live without being influenced by others. I don't know what the way forward is, other than to think about this kind of thing. I guess I try to think about a lot, which is interdependency.
I think as an Asian cultural model, a more cellular division of society where the interdependence of each cell, each organ in the social body.
Yeah.
And I think it's beautiful. And I hope we get there.
Yeah.
It's the only way to handle it.
Yeah, I mean, in 10 years, Saturn will go into Pisces. But yeah, it may work. All right, any other questions?
Yes.
Hi. Nice to see you. Yes. 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 Yeah. Well, it is. I mean, it's pink. I really tried to indicate that it was a love story, just in the visual, It's funny to me that it was missed. I think because the word fuck was used so much, as people were like, maybe this isn't about love. But yeah, I mean, to me, it's the story of two people who... Wait, I have to take these off now because I don't want to see us. It makes me nervous. All of your actual facial expressions. To me, it's the story of two people who are trying to find a kind of an intimacy together. They both have a lot of, they're both people of color, they're both poor, they're both struggling, They're kind of trying to find each other in the midst of all this chaos around them. So to me, it's a very long, drawn-out date. And that's why Rafael is so he's really trying to impress motherfuck. Which, to me is really adorable, but I think, maybe that you need to get further in to understand that that's what he's trying to do. But yeah, thank you for noticing that. And you also mentioned Wim Wenders' Wings of Desire in your blurb, and I was like, yeah. Like an angel and an earthling. I just saw that in Berlin in the original with a packed theater last summer, and it was that's the way to see it. All right. Going once, going twice. I'm going to sign some if anybody wants that.
You want to?
Oh,
question?
sorry.
Just a random question. What are your thoughts on all-girls schools?
I don't know. I mean, I guess if you want that. I guess that's, maybe my general, like, if you want to go to an all-girls school and other people want to do that with you, oh, well, then they shouldn't have to go. Oh. I don't know. What do you think about it? Oh. Do you want to ask Asher?
I have no opinion on all
Yeah,
girls school.
I don't think I have an opinion. Other than if you want to go, you should go. And if you don't want to go, you shouldn't go.
Okay.
All right.
I think we're done.
Thank you, everyone.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget, you can listen to this and all of our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.